Hello, this is Josh, and I'm going to tell my my testimony, my spiritual experiences that I've had, and the conclusions that it's led me to. This is being recorded for Dan, and for Wayne, and for other people. Let's see. I'm not going to tell my whole life story at this point. I'm going to start at about 5 years ago. I had spent several years of my life researching the occult. I grew up Christian. I looked under every rock that I could think to look under for dark things going on, and I learned a lot of interesting and horrible things that were going on in the world. But overall, it was my fascination in secret societies and their tie-in with the occult that fascinated me intensely. Specifically, though, the areas of those two things that interested me the most was things that were going on with angels, and what I was learning about that. So, to elaborate on that a little bit, what I found out was that secret societies, you name the secret society, doesn't matter for the most part who that is. Even if you go back hundreds or even thousands of years, typically what they practice is some sort of occult ritual, also known as witchcraft, and they, using that, communicate with other beings and channel in information from them, and those other beings will end up interacting with them in different ways. And so that's something that I found again and again and again, whether that's, of course, the Masons. That's easily demonstrable with the Masons if you research their teachings and their books that are easily found online. So these sorts of things were incredibly fascinating to me, and I up until my I was 29. I was drug free. I started drinking when I was 29, and when I was I think I was 30 or 31, I started to smoke pot, and smoking weed made my interest in the occult, made it skyrocket. That became something that just became so much more interesting for me. I had a drive to research that. So that was going on in my life. At the time, I was living in Springfield, Oregon. Currently, I live in Portland, and so one of the first significant things that happened to me was I was staying at my sister's house. I spent the night at my sister's house, and I was sleeping on her couch, and while I was crashing on her couch, I was watching TV after everybody went to bed, and I was watching this movie that was on TV called The Omen. And The Omen is a movie from, I think, the late 70s, early 80s about the Antichrist. And I had no fears. I was watching it, none whatsoever, and not that we're supposed to live in fear, but anyway, I was watching The Omen, and in The Omen, there is a scene, or there's a series of scenes, actually, where they use actual occult incantations to summon Baphomet, which is an incarnation of the devil. So in the movie that I was watching, I was kind of shocked that that would be on public television, that they would be showing that, and it was just, frankly, it was interesting to me. And so the good guys are on the trail of these Illuminati types as they're in the woods conjuring Baphomet, and ultimately it is their goal to bring about the Antichrist. And so so I saw that, and in the movie they do conjure Baphomet, who appears, and that was basically that. I didn't watch it all the way through. I ended up turning it off and going to sleep. But that night I woke up and my eyes weren't totally focused, but as I woke up, I saw a light being cast across the room that I was in, and I just started to instinctively train my eyes on this light that was traveling across the room, and I was operating under the assumption that it was like a headlight shining through a curtain or something. But as my eyes focused on it, and it was moving maybe this quick, as my eyes focused on it, and it traveled maybe 8 feet or so across the room, I became aware that it wasn't a light cast on the wall, that it was a light that seemed to be kind of hovering in the middle of the room. And then as soon as I started to have that awareness, it just kind of turned into nothing. And I wasn't positive about that. I wanted to shake that possibility that was what had occurred. And I didn't like it, but I mean, I went to sleep, and that was that. So I continued to have my occult fascination, and to just spend a lot of energy talking about it, thinking about it, researching it, and the next situation that I had was less than a year later. I was up on a hill in Springfield, and Springfield has this great hill you can see for miles and miles when you're up on this hill, and not a lot of people up there. So I went up there. It was the summertime. There was tall grass blowing, and I was feeling artistic, and I had my headphones on. I was out in the middle of this grassy field, and I was journaling my thoughts about angels. And so and I was smoking weed. I was out in this field, and I was by myself. And so some time went by, I don't know, 10-15 minutes maybe. And all of a sudden, some people almost trampled me. They were running through this field, a bunch of people, and I had my Nikon camera. I thought they were going to step on it, which kind of made me angry, and I picked it up and took off my headphones, and I said, "What are you people doing?" And they said, "We're a drinking and running club. Would you like to join us?" I said, "Yes." So I threw my stuff in my backpack and start running down the hill with these people. So these people ran down the hill, and they went in right down the hill. There is downtown Springfield, and they stopped at this nasty strip club called the Brick House. I go in the Brick House with them. Didn't particularly want to be in there. Left the Brick House. Then they went a little farther down to this parking lot. And when they got to the parking lot, there was a tailgating situation. So there was a truck, there's a bunch of beers, there's a guy sitting there, he starts handing out beers to everyone. And I thought that was awesome, so I drank this beer. And frankly, by that time, I was quite sober. So I drink this beer, and I need to tell you a little bit about this group of people. So they were anywhere from the age of young college clear up to what looked to be 60s to me. It was a wide range of people. It wasn't like one specific demographic. And so I'm sitting there with these people I've never seen before until I ran down the hill with them, and they start making really awkward sexual statements towards each other, and I don't. It was one of the most uncomfortable things I've ever been around ever in my life. And I've told other people the story, and I've been told it's called hashing, but hashing, if that's what it is not cool. It's horrible, and yeah, that sucked. And so fortunately, the people took off running again. So they took off running up the hill, back up to that same hill, and so I'm running up this hill. And I get back up towards the top of the hill. It's a pretty good run, and I was running beside this an older man. He was at least late 50s, and we're just making small talk, and he says to me, we're going to have this gathering at the top of the hill, and when we get there, would you like to have a spiritual experience? And I didn't know what to make of that. I said sure, and to me, anything can be a spiritual experience to someone. I mean, you don't really know what they mean by that. People could say, I ate this pasta and it was a spiritual experience because it's so good or whatever. So I didn't know what they meant by that. So I get to the top of the hill, and they form this big circle. There's about 30 people, and when we formed this circle, they brought me into the middle of it. They said, we're going to initiate Josh, and we're gonna haze him. And so Josh, come on up. So I go into the middle of this group, and they had like a hospital metal bedpan, and there was a little plaque on it that had the name of their group. It was something really innocuous, like the Drinking and Running Club or something like that. And I wish I could remember it, but I don't. And they pour a beer into this bedpan, and they say, all right, you need to drink this bedpan. And I didn't want to do that. My conscience told me, you're defiling yourself, just don't do that. But the other part of me was saying, it's hazing, whatever, you just got to do it, you just have to. So I did it, and so I drink from this bedpan. I'm not enjoying it, but whatever, I drink from this bedpan. Everybody laughs, and that's pretty much it. So then they get me back out, and I'm standing in the circle, and they tell a few crude jokes. They talk about some upcoming events. It was just like any other group that might convene for a meeting. And then after that happened, they said, all right, well, we're going to sing songs now. And I'm like, okay, this is just, the weirdness keeps happening and happening. So they all hold hands in this huge circle on top of this hill in Springfield, and there's an obelisk up there, which I'm aware of. I'm not stoked about that. And there's a totem pole, and they all start holding hands in this big circle. I'm like, what is going on with these people? So they start singing these camp songs, and I'm watching them. I don't know the songs, but I know their tunes. And I realized these are songs that I used to sing when I was in Sunday school, like when I was really little, only they reworked the lyrics to mock angels. And when I realized that, I let go of their hands, and I stepped back, and I'm just looking at these people like, what is going on? It was so weird, and it's bizarre. And so basically the people were done. I was really put off by pretty much everything that had happened. It's kind of a wild adventure, to say the least, but they were done. So they all start to leave, and I was relieved. But one of these guys that was part of the group said, hey, we're headed down to this bar that's right across from the Matthew Knight Arena. And if you'd like, you can come down with us, and I'll give you a ride down there, and you can smoke weed with me. So I was like, all right, I'll go. So I drive down the hill with this guy, or he drives me down the hill. We get to across from the Matthew Knight Arena, and I smoked some weed in the back of his truck. And I guess it wasn't in the back of his truck, in his truck. And then we got out of the truck. We go inside the bar, and I see all these same people that I had seen before, and I was so put off by seeing these people again. And I was like, what am I thinking coming down here to be with these people anymore? I want nothing to do with these people. So I left. I left the bar. I called my friend Danielle, and I said, Danielle, I'm stuck downtown. She lived downtown at the time. I said, can you give me a ride back home in Springfield? Which is like 5-10 minute ride. So I get out, and I'm waiting at the bus stop, and a few minutes go by, and Danielle comes pulling up, completely panicked, and she's got her head and her neck craned outside of her car window, and she's like, do you see that? Do you see that? And I'm like, what? And she's like, those lights. And I don't see any lights. And she's like, they're gone. And I go, okay, what are you talking about? And she said she was driving down the road to come pick me up, and she was driving on a road that's parallel with the Matthew Knight Arena that goes straight towards that bar, and which is kind of sort of along the riverfront that runs through Eugene by the University of Oregon. And this series of lights had been hovering above her car, and I guess I won't say hovering, they were moving, they were floating, and they were going above her car. And she said that they were balls of light, and there was, I don't know, maybe 9 or so of them. They were independently moving, so they weren't all perfectly locked. They were independently moving in sort of almost like a kite string, but towards the front of this group was 3 lights that were forming like a triangle. And those lights, she said, as they were going over her car, they were headed towards the bar where I was at, and they went and they basically stopped over the top of it. She said that not only did she see them, but there was other people who were beside her car, or as she was driving by, pedestrians, and they were just kind of in shock. And she was totally flipped out. She's not a particularly spiritual person in terms of she's not a particular faith professing person. I'll say that. She believes in a higher power. I know that, but that is not something that she would joke about at all. So she drove me home, and when I got home, I was living at the time with a Reiki practitioner, and had another roommate who was into witchcraft, and I didn't particularly care too much, didn't bother me. And anyway, so I get home and I say, Lisa, you're never going to believe what just happened. And before we could finish, she goes, you saw UFOs. And we're like, how do you know this? And she goes, I have a friend who lives downtown, and he's been seeing them, and he saw them again today. So we were amazed. Of course we were amazed. As a little follow-up to that story, the next day, Lisa was downtown, and she was eating in a restaurant downtown Eugene, and there was someone talking close to her, and they had an old crappy cell phone, and they were talking about seeing those same lights, and they had footage of it, and it was just like any number of UFO balls of light videos that you might find on YouTube. There was crappy cell phone footage of these balls of light with a black background, which is the sky. So that happened, and that really just it disturbed me. I felt horrible that I had had anything to do with those people. I felt disgusted with myself that I had drank from their bedpan and agreed to have whatever spiritual experiences with them, because it is my belief that that the occult or secret societies, through their witchcraft practices, are able to summon fallen angels, and that those fallen angels show up through what people widely believe are unidentified flying objects. And sure, they are unidentified. They can take, basically, as far as I can tell, whatever form they prefer, but it seems like balls of light are commonly seen. So I can tell you I didn't like that experience, and I felt really uneasy having been involved with it. And but time went by. I didn't stop what I was up to. I continued smoking pot, continued researching everything, but I became more vocal about what I believed was going on. I basically told everybody what I thought was happening in terms of secret societies practicing occult rituals so that they can communicate with fallen angels. So I let's see, maybe less than a year goes by, and I had a different girlfriend later on, and she learned everything that I had to say about what was going on. I told her everything, and I told her all of my experiences. And one day we were sitting in my living room, and we were sitting on a couch not unlike this one, and there was a wall right behind me, just like there is here. And I was sitting basically where she was to my left, and I was sitting on this couch, and there was a computer monitor that's basically right in front of me, about here. And so we are sitting at this couch, and I wanted her to watch a documentary on UFOs. They were balls of light that had menaced people in Venezuela, and it was a well documented event. And I forget the name of the documentary, but I know it's under several names on YouTube. I think one of the names is like UFOs kill people, or aliens killing people, or something like that. But what happened is these balls of light had showed up and were menacing some small town in Venezuela, and they were chasing people. It seemed like there was beams of light were going through people's roofs and scaring people horribly. And there was some people that were reporting burns. The burns were documented. A woman died of a heart attack. I think that's how they qualify the name of the documentary. But the event was recorded by the Venezuelan military who came in. There was a reporters that came in and reported and interviewed pretty much everybody, and doctors recorded, photographed these burn marks in these people. So it was a well documented event, and I felt that it was really similar to what I had experienced. So my ex-girlfriend was again, she was sitting to my left, and I said, let's watch this documentary. So we put it on. And as the documentary is going for a few minutes, after it's going for a few minutes, she says, I don't want to watch this. This gives me the creeps. I already believe it. I don't want to watch it. So I said, okay. So I turned it off. and we were watching something else. So maybe 5 minutes go by as we're watching something else, and my head was at the time angled about, let's see, I was looking about this direction. She was sitting over here, so we were both looking at this video monitor that was in front of me, about here. And over my right shoulder, right about here, all of a sudden, this really, really bright light just turns on. And I saw it out of the corner of my eye at first, in my peripheral vision. So I turned my head to look at this light, and for the first instant, like, I was just genuinely confused. I remember perfectly the sequence of thoughts that went through my head. I just was confused. I was like, what is this? How is there a light there? And so I turned my head, I saw it, I didn't know what it was, but the characteristics were, to me, it reminded me of a camera flash, like an old camera. They almost have like a bluish hue to them, and the light had gleams coming out of it, beautiful gleams coming out of it. And when you see like gleaming light, sometimes like through a raining windshield or something like that, it just seems to be going perfectly out. But these gleams seem to be kind of going at me, which was weird. So those are the visual characteristics of it. For maybe half a second or a third of a second, my next thoughts were, I was mesmerized by its beauty. I was just looking at it and thinking, wow, like, that is a gorgeous light. And then fear just completely overtook me. I was petrified and frozen. I knew what I was looking at, and I was filled with terror. And it remained perfectly motionless. It was a little bit bigger than a golf ball, but smaller than a tennis ball. And I just stood there, or just sat there staring at it. And then after at least 3 seconds, it just went down to nothing. It just faded away. So as soon as that happens, I turned to my left as soon as it's gone, and I looked at my ex, and she basically started freaking out. She started yelling, "Did you see that? Did you see that?" And yeah, I saw that. And so what she did is she ran across the room. She went and got this book that I had called Look to the Stars. I had found this book in a thrift store. The book was about fallen angels and them returning to the earth. And the book had given me the creeps. I never did end up reading it, but I had it in our house. And on the cover of this book, there's these people looking up at these stars, at a star that's gleaming. And so she brings me this book, and this is exactly what I saw. This is exactly what I saw. I know. I was there. It was over my shoulder. So that terrified me horribly. We left. I went to my brother's house. My brother laughed at us, and it was aggravating. But I knew what I saw, and she knew what she saw, and I didn't make it up. She saw it too. That happened to me. That's a real thing that happened to me. 100%. That's not a UFO coming from another galaxy in a spaceship. That's not what that is. That's not what that is at all. It's not possible. That wasn't swamp gas. That's not what that was.